Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be doing the picks for week 8 of the 2022 season of the Overwatch League. This of course is the second week of the Midseason Madness qualifiers. This is the first week for the APAC teams. They're going to be playing their first matches of this tournament cycle this weekend. And of course the second week for the Western Region teams. So let's jump in and start with Friday, where the first match is the Los Angeles Valiant taking on the Philadelphia Fusion. This is an interesting one to me. Valiant obviously been in the center of a number of stories recently because of some changes they made to their roster. Adding Marvel, adding Molly, but also reports saying that they basically funded this roster through players paying for it. It was a weird story there, so regardless of all that, this Valiant roster does look better than they did, in my opinion at least, in the Kickoff Clash tournament, and I think that they have a pretty solid roster all in all. The Fusion had a very nice run in the Kickoff Clash, making it to the finals where they lost to the Seoul Dynasty. They seem to match up well against teams like Shanghai, but they struggled against Seoul and Chengdu and the Spark throughout the first tournament cycle. And so it'll be interesting to see kind of how things go here in the Midseason Madness, but I am going to go in favor of the Philadelphia Fusion. I think they still look to be the better team, the Valiant. I think they should only get better as the season progresses. They had a very good first tournament. I think that their second tournament should hopefully be better considering how well they did last time around. But I think the Valiant and their improvements will make this a closer series, so I'm going to say it is a 3-2 in favor of the Philadelphia Fusion. Next is the Seoul Dynasty taking on the Chengdu Hunters. This is another series I think could be pretty good. Chengdu is up and down. Their roster is kind of bizarre right now. And I think that they are in a pretty rough spot when it comes to the meta. If the Western region is anything to go off of, we are going to be seeing quite a bit of Sojourn and Tracer in this meta. And what do you know, Chengdu can't play that composition because their DPS line is not flexible enough to really do that. Jimmy doesn't play Sojourn, Jimmy doesn't play Tracer, so I don't know what they're going to run. I really don't know what to expect from them. Wrecking Ball compositions should theoretically be decent for them because Gaga is a good Wrecking Ball, so I don't have much of a concern in that front, where I think that they should be fine on that specific role at the very least. Their support line, I think, is pretty good as well. It's really just that DPS line that I'm concerned about. Seoul coming off a tournament win where they look very, very good. I have no doubts in their ability to play this composition, whatever it is. They can play pretty much anything. I don't have any reason to doubt that. So, to me, this is a win for the Dynasty. Pretty one-sided affair, most likely, but I will give Chengdu a map. 3-1 win for the Seoul Dynasty here in this one. Moving on to the Western region, the New York Excelsior take on the London Spitfire. I think London's going to dominate this series, and I think it's going to be probably a 3-0 win for them. They look good, New York doesn't. That's all there is to say. Next match is the Dallas Fuel taking on the Florida Mayhem. This one has the potential to be a very good match, as Dallas did not look good this past weekend, and Florida looked pretty mixed. They had a decent showing against Toronto. They did not look as great against London. So we kind of know where they are in that kind of middle of the pack category based on their performances last week. Dallas lost to the Shock and to the Reign, two teams who look very good right now. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how this Fuel roster bounces back from last weekend. They're going to be going up against Hydron on that Sojourn, who looked very good. It doesn't look like Kai levels of good like we saw from them last week, but you know, they at least have experience at this point playing against some really good Sojourns, so we'll see kind of what happens here. But I think this is an interesting matchup. I think this one really should be pretty close. If we see Dallas in the form they were last weekend, I could definitely see this match going the distance. If it's not that form, if they look better, it could be a one-sided affair. It's a little too early right now to say for sure what it's going to be, but I am going to go in favor of the Fuel. I think they are still the better roster right now. I think on paper they look better. And I think just on a talent difference, they should be able to pull this one out and get the win. So I'm going to go with the Dallas Fuel winning this one by a score of 3-2. Final match on Friday is the Vancouver Titans taking on the Atlanta Reign. I don't think this one will be very close. The Titans look better than they were, earlier in the season, but I think the Vancouver Titans are still not Reign levels of good, and so I think this will be a win for the Reign. Pretty one-sided, pretty convincing win for them. I think 3-0, Atlanta Reign or Vancouver Titans. Moving on to the APAC region for Saturday. Hangzhou Spark take on the Guangzhou Charge, the battle of the Joes. I think that this one is going to be a relatively one-sided affair. I still think the Guangzhou Charge don't look very good. Obviously, they made some changes to their roster, dropping Eileen and dropping Molly. Maybe they will add a Preta to this roster. We don't know yet for sure. I think the Spark does look better right now. They had a very good tournament last time around, though they didn't do well in the tournament itself. Their qualifiers were pretty good, only losing to Shanghai. I really don't think this would be too close, and the Spark just look to be the better roster, all things considered. So I have confidence in their flexibility. I don't really have that confidence in the Charge. They're not super flexible, in that tank role in particular. Rio doesn't really play ball very well, stuff like that. They can play Krong on the Sigma and look decent, but I think this will be a pretty one-sided affair in favor of the Hangzhou Spark. 3-1 win in my eyes. Moving on to the next APAC match, it is my first big pick game of the weekend, the Seoul Dynasty taking on the Shanghai Dragons. They have played already, three times this season. That's the answer. 3 times this season. Shanghai has won 2 of them, Seoul has won 1 of them, and all 3 times the series went to map 5. So this has been a banger of a series every single time they've played. Seoul got lucky the most recent time, or at least, if not got lucky, had the better day last time they played and managed to get the win. But I still think it is going to be a very close series no matter what. These 2 teams who I think are at the best of the APAC region. Shanghai has struggled against Philly, sure, but I still think that they are to be a favorite in this region. I do think that the Fusion kind of, ghost on their shoulder is a very difficult thing to try to break. But I think they right now have shown that they are a very top-level team. The only teams they've lost to so far in the league are Philly and Shanghai. And I think that it's going to be, Philly and Seoul, not Philly and Shanghai. They are Shanghai. Philly and Seoul. So this to me is going to be a banger of a series. It really comes down to meta and what is going to be the meta this time around. If they have to run double flex support, you have to give the advantage to Shanghai there. I don't know what Vindane looks like on his Batiste. I don't really think we've seen a lot of it. And if we have, it hasn't been anything like elite level, whereas if the Dragons have to run double flex support, they can put Bebe in, but also we've seen Lee Jigon play Batiste, and it's a pretty solid pick for him. Tank-wise, obviously, Shanghai has the flexibility. They have Void and Fate. They can run whichever one they need to, and both of them are pretty solid players. And then DPS-wise, presumably we're going to be seeing a lot more of that Sojourn and Tracer, which I would imagine would be Fleta Lip for Shanghai, and I would imagine is Profits for Seoul. So, I think it'll be a really good series. I think it'll be really, really close, but I am going to go in favor of what the numbers have told me so far this season. Shanghai is 2-1 against Seoul. They have the advantage so far, and to me, there's no reason to think that that won't happen again, and so I am going to go with the Shanghai Dragons winning this series by a score of 3-2. I think it'll be very, very close. It definitely go either way, but right now I feel like Shanghai, you have to pick them in this series based on the advantage they have right now, I think. We've seen them do better consistently against Seoul this season, so Shanghai to me takes this one. Final APAC match on Saturday is the Chengdu Hunters versus the Philadelphia Fusion. Fusion lost to the Hunters last time they played, but I think this meta is going to be much better for the Fusion and much worse for the Hunters. The Hunters just do not have anything really going for them in terms of meta picks. Their DPS line is not built for this meta at all, and I think it's going to look really poor this meta. We're going to see some holes in their lineup. Now, they did beat the Fusion last time they played, so I think they'll probably still push the Fusion around a little bit. I think the Fusion don't match up the best against this team because I think that they just struggle to kind of figure them out. So I think there is a possibility that we see a really good look from this Hunters roster against the Fusion in particular, but I still think the Fusion are the favorites to win this series, so I'm going to pick them to win, though I think it'll be pretty close. I'm going to say 3-2 win for the Fusion over the Chengdu Hunters for this one. Moving on to the Western region, Toronto Defiant taking on the Washington Justice. Two teams have been pretty inconsistent. Justice were 1-1 last weekend. Defiant had a rough 0-2 weekend last weekend. They did not look very good. To me, the Justice are kind of in an interesting spot where they are still, I think, trying to figure out exactly what their identity is. I think they're waiting a lot for Vigilante to come of age, which should happen in this tournament cycle. So if they have to run double flex support, they will look, I think, really good, because Vigilante is a really good player and will provide them that extra firepower in that flex support role that could be a big difference maker for this team. Not to say Krillin or Opener have looked bad, but I think Vigilante is just that good of a player. And I think in terms of DPS line, I think the Justice are among the best in the league. Their DPS line is really, really good. So to me, it really comes down to they are a team that has the talent to match a lot of the other best teams in the league. They just make mistakes, which I don't know what the reason for that is. I don't know if it's they don't have a strong shot calling structure, or if they have a weak coaching structure. I don't really know what the reason for that is. It does concern me a bit when I watch this Justice team. The Defiant are a team that right now I'm really struggling to kind of place where they are, because they should look better than I think they really are. Obviously, they've had some coaching changes now, and they've had some personnel issues behind the scenes that have most likely been sorted with the changes to the coaching staff. They've looked fine, but to me, it's hard to pick the Defiant over the Justice. So I think the Justice right now just look to be a better, more complete team than the Defiant are. I think it'll be close. I could definitely see it going either way, but I'm going to go with the Justice. I'm one of the few people left in the world, I think, who still think the Justice are a good team. I think that they lose games they probably shouldn't lose at times, but I think that ultimately they're a team who typically plays better against stronger opponents. They typically play up to their competition or play down to their competition. They seem to try to match the level of their competition. And I think when you're relatively equal to a team like you are the Defiant, I think the Justice should be favored. So I'm going to pick the Justice 3-1 for this one. Second big pick game of the weekend is the San Francisco Shock taking on the Atlanta Reign. This was the hardest match for me to pick the entire weekend. And it is a very, 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 very interesting matchup, because when you look at the way these two teams have played, you know, they matched up in the Kickoff Clash, and it was a 3-1 win for the Atlanta Reign. You know, I don't think it was the best meta for the Shock necessarily. I don't think that they were able to really look as strong in that meta in the way that the Reign were. And the Reign figured out what worked for them, and they really ran it, and they found a way to make it work really, really, really consistently. For this meta, I think that you have to look at really the Sojourn play, because Sojourn is, I think, going to be the biggest part of what we see going forward. And I think that the Sojourn is the key to what happens here, right? If it's double flex support, the Shock should be favored because they have Violet and they have Finn, two flex support players. The Reign do not have two flex supports. They have Ultraviolet and OG, though OG can play Batiste. We've seen him do it in the past somewhat regularly, somewhat consistently, so we know that's a role he can play. And then when you have the tank role, obviously the Shock have brought in Mikey to kind of round out their tank role so they can run those main tanks, they can run those off tanks. And the Reign have Gator and Hawk, once again, run the main tanks, run the off tanks. To me, it really comes down to that kind of Sojourn matchup, and it comes down to that DPS matchup. I am going to go with this one in favor of the Atlanta Reign. I think it'll be very, very, very close. I think it's going to be a 5-map series. I think it's going to go all the way the distance. So I think it'll be a 3-2 for the Atlanta Reign. But for me right now, Kai looks unstoppable. He looks to be the best Sojourn in the league right now. And if the impact on Sojourn is as high as it looks to be, it's going to be very tough, I think, to stop him. And that, to me, is the key to victory. Kai can turn fights. He looks so good right now. And so for me, I'm going to have to go with the Atlanta Reign. It's a tough pick for me. I really don't feel super confident in this one. I'm really 50-50 on this one. But I think if I have to flip the coin, you know, 6 times out of 10, I think it goes the way of the Atlanta Reign as opposed to the San Francisco Shock. Final match on Saturday is the Dallas Fuel taking on the Vancouver Titans. I think this one will be a pretty one-sided affair, all things considered. I don't really think that there's much to take away from this Vancouver Titans roster right now. They don't look great, and I think that the Dallas Fuel should be able to win this one. Even if they don't beat the Mayhem, I still think the Fuel are significantly better than the Titans. Even a struggling Fuel shouldn't lose to the Titans. So, Fuel 3-0, Titans. Moving on to Sunday, LA Valiant taking the Guangzhou Charge. I don't think this one will be close. I don't think the Charge are very good, and even though the Valiant are doing all sorts of weird stuff and bizarre roster building things. I still think they're a better team than the Charge. Both these teams are kind of in controversy right now, so that's kind of fun. We'll see what happens with that, but really, I think the Valiant are the better team than the Charge. Not even really a question in my eyes. So I think the Valiant take this one pretty easily. 3-1 victory, in my opinion, Valiant over the Charge. For the final match in the APAC region for this week, we have the Shanghai Dragons taking on the Hangzhou Spark. This one, I think, has the potential to be a pretty close match. It was a pretty close match the last time these two teams played during the Kickoff Clash. Shanghai, I think, is right now still one of the best teams in the league. Yes, they didn't make the tournament for the Kickoff Clash, or the finals for the Kickoff Clash, but I think they still looked very, very good. They still, basically were a map away from making the finals. Obviously, that 3-2 series they had against the Seoul Dynasty, so to me, it's silly to write off this Dragons team after that performance. Obviously, the Spark team played it close to Shanghai last time they played. It was 3-2 last time these two teams played as well. So I think it's going to be another close series, most likely, when these two teams kick off this weekend. They're both pretty good, but I think right now I have to give the edge to the Shanghai Dragons. They look better right now. I think they will take this series away. I think it'll be close. It's going to be a 3-2, but I think it'll be a 3-2 win for the Dragons instead of for the Spark. Move on to the Western region, Florida Mayhem taking on the San Francisco Shock. I think this one is not going to be as close as some people might think it is. As good as the Mayhem, I think, have looked, I think the Shock right now look to be a team that are basically dominating competition that isn't like bottom-level teams. Dominating teams that aren't elite-level teams, like your Gladiators or your Reign. They dominated the Fuel last week, and I think that the Mayhem and the Fuel are around the same area in terms of skill, and so to me, it's pretty obvious that the Shock should be really, really good against the Mayhem. I think the Shock look better right now. I think this meta is really good for them. Yes, I didn't pick them to beat the Reign. I think that one will be really, really close, and I could see it going either way, but this one, I think you just have to go with the Shock. They just look so much better right now. They look incredible in this meta. They haven't lost a regular season game yet, so I think the Shock take it. I think they take it 3-0. I think it's not going to be that close. Truly, I think it's going to be a pretty one-sided affair in favor of the Shock. Next, we have the LA Gladiators taking on the Houston Outlaws. This one has the potential to be a pretty good series. The Outlaws have been up and down this season. They had a pretty good weekend to kick off the Midseason Madness, which is good for them. Moves them up into a very respectable, I believe, third place spot in the Western region. But the LA Gladiators are that #1 overall team. And let's be real, I don't really see the Outlaws beating the Gladiators where the Gladiators have looked. They look really, really good. They still look to be an elite team right now. I still think the Gladiators look to be one of the best teams in the entire league. Not even just this region. The Gladiators look absolutely incredible. So I am going to go in favor of the Gladiators. I'm going to pick them to win the series 3-1 over the Houston Outlaws. Final match of the weekend is the Boston Uprising taking on the Paris Eternal, soon to be Vegas Eternal, 2023. This match is a bizarre one because neither of these teams are particularly good. Both these teams have a combined 3 wins. The Eternal just got their first win last weekend. The Uprising don't look all that special, though they did have a pretty close series against the Atlanta Reign that almost went the direction of the Uprising. But ultimately, I think this is going to be an interesting series to watch because of the changes to the Eternal roster are really going to determine how close they keep the series. I think that Dove and Wub have both looked very good so far this season. I think they've had a pretty big and solid impact so far. And so I'm curious to kind of see how this team does when they match up against an Uprising team that has been kind of struggling quite a bit. The Uprising have been trying different things, trying different players, and trying different looks. I don't really think any of it's been working particularly well, so I honestly am going to go in favor of the Eternal for this one. Maybe a bit of a surprise, maybe a bit of an upset pick, but I think they look better right now, so I'm going to go the Eternal, taking this one, and I'm going to say it is a score of 3-1 for the Eternal. So real quick, let's take a look at my picks for this week. The whole shebang, you can see them here. My big picks, all that type of stuff. Interesting week. I think there's a lot of pretty one-sided games with a couple of really nice golden little gems in there, some nice nuggets of pretty solid games in there as well, strewn throughout. So, pretty solid week overall. Glad to see the APAC teams back in action, especially Seoul versus Shanghai. I think it's going to be an absolute banger of a match. I think every game this season between them is going to be pretty good, based on what we've seen so far. But that is all from me for today. Hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did and you want more like it in the future, consider liking and subscribing. Comment down below your thoughts on anything that I have talked about today. If you think I'm wrong about a match, right about a match, whatever it is, let me know. Love to hear from you down below. But that is all from me for today. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.